The carriage wheels stopped, and so did my heart. Through the iron-barred window, I could see the obsidian towers of the Blood Moon Palace piercing the twilight sky like fangs. This was it. The end of Ja, the girl who once dreamed of finding her true mate under the full moon. That girl died the moment my father's trembling hands signed the contract, trading his daughter for his debts. Alpha King Cole doesn't keep his purchases long, the guard had whispered during the journey, his eyes full of pity. The last woman who entered his chambers. They say her screams echoed for 3 days before the silence came. I was 22 years old, and I was about to become a monster's property. The heavy oak doors of his private chambers loomed before me like the gates of hell. When they shut behind me with a final, damning click, I forced myself to stand tall. If I was going to die, I would die with dignity. But the scene before me shattered every expectation. The fearsome Alpha King, the man whose reputation made hardened warriors tremble, was on his knees on the marble floor. His broad shoulders shook with sobs, and in his hands he clutched an ornate golden frame. A portrait of a woman who had my face. Before we dive into Ja's heartbreaking journey, if you love stories about forbidden love, powerful alphas, and women who refuse to live in anyone's shadow, hit that subscribe button right now. This story gets darker, more twisted, and more romantic with every chapter. You won't want to miss what happens when Cole finally realizes what he's been blind to. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now let's begin. The cards fell like autumn leaves, hearts, spades, diamonds scattered across the worn tavern table. My father's hands trembled as he reached for them, his fingers stained with ink and desperation. I watched from the doorway, my stomach knotting tighter with each flip of the deck. He'd promised this would be the last time. He always promised. Another round, he slurred, pushing forward the deed to our cottage. The deed that had been in our family for 3 generations. The deed that represented the only roof I'd ever known. The man across from him smiled, a cold, calculated expression that never reached his eyes. He wasn't from our village. His clothes were too fine, his posture too perfect. When he moved, there was something predatory in the way he shifted, like a wolf deciding whether to toy with its prey before the kill. "I'm afraid you have nothing left to wager, Marcus," the stranger said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "Unless..." His gaze slid to me. I stepped back instinctively, my shoulders hitting the doorframe. My father's bloodshot eyes followed the stranger's line of sight, and I watched something die in them. Not conscience. He'd lost that years ago, somewhere between the first bet and the 100th broken promise. No, what died was hope. The last pathetic ember of believing he could fix this himself. "She's not part of this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The stranger stood, unfolding to his full height with an elegance that made my skin crawl. He circled the table slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood before me. Up close, I could see his eyes were an unusual amber color, almost glowing in the tavern's dim light. "The Alpha King has been searching for something very specific," he said, tilting his head as he studied my face. His nostrils flared slightly as if he was scenting me. Silver hair, blue eyes, a particular delicacy of features. My hand flew to my hair self-consciously. I'd always hated how it stood out, how the other village girls whispered that it made me look like a ghost, like something not quite human. "She's 22, my father said behind me, and my blood turned to ice. "Unbonded, pure." "Father." "The Alpha King pays generously for exceptional acquisitions," the stranger continued, ignoring my strangled protest. "Enough to clear all debts with surplus remaining. Your father would be a wealthy man, Marcus, comfortable for the rest of his days." I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but the stranger's amber eyes held me frozen, and I realized with creeping horror that this wasn't a random card game. This had been orchestrated. They'd been looking for someone like me. Looking for me specifically. "What does he want with her?" my father asked, and I hated that he sounded like he was considering it. Hated that I could already see the decision forming in his weak, desperate features. "That's not your concern. Sign the contract, and your daughter becomes the property of Alpha King Cole. Refuse, and I'll have you arrested for the debts you owe to the crown. You'll rot in the dungeons beneath the Blood Moon Palace. Is that really a better fate?" My father's pen scratched across parchment before I could form another word of protest. The sound of my life ending was surprisingly quiet, just ink on paper, a signature that sealed my doom. The journey to the Blood Moon Palace took 3 days. I sat in a gilded carriage that felt more like a coffin, watching my village disappear behind me until it was nothing but a smudge on the horizon. The guards who accompanied me never spoke, never met my eyes. I was cargo to them, nothing more. But the driver, a grizzled man with scars crossing his weathered face, took pity on me during a rest stop on the 2nd day. "You're headed to the Ice King," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder to ensure the guards were out of earshot. "That's what we call him, Alpha Cole." "What's he like?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The driver's expression darkened. "Heartless, cold as winter's first frost. He hasn't smiled since the day his first mate died, 5 years past. They say he killed her himself in a fit of rage, though no one can prove it. Since then, he's refused every potential match the council's offered. Broken 3 betrothals. Some say he's gone mad with grief. Others say he never had a heart to begin with." My hands clenched in my lap. "Then why does he want me?" "Can't say for certain, girl, but the last woman brought to his chambers." He trailed off, shaking his head. "They carried her out 3 days later. What was left of her, anyway? Servants say her screams echoed through the palace corridors like a haunting. Some nights, they claim they can still hear them." I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the time the obsidian towers of the Blood Moon Palace appeared on the horizon, I was hollow with terror, running on nothing but the primal instinct to survive. The palace loomed like a beautiful nightmare, all black stone and silver filigree, Gothic spires clawing at the twilight sky. Gargoyles perched along the parapets, their stone eyes seeming to track my approach. The full moon rose behind the tallest tower, enormous and blood-red, casting everything in crimson light. I was led through corridors of polished marble, past portraits of stern-faced alphas and lunas who seemed to judge me with their painted eyes. Servants in silver livery scurried past, none meeting my gaze. The palace smelled of sandalwood and something else, something wild and dangerous that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Finally, we stopped before a pair of massive oak doors carved with wolves in mid-hunt. The guards who'd accompanied me from the village bowed and retreated, leaving me alone with a severe-looking woman in midnight blue robes. "The Alpha King will see you now," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "When you enter, keep your eyes down, speak only if spoken to, do not touch anything, do not move unless instructed." She made it sound like I was entering a cage with a wild beast. Perhaps I was. The doors swung open with a groan, revealing a chamber lit by a roaring fireplace and scattered candelabras. Shadows danced across walls hung with tapestries depicting ancient battles. The room was opulent, silk curtains, Persian rugs, furniture that probably cost more than my entire village, but it felt cold, empty. Like a mausoleum, dressed up as a living space. And there, silhouetted against the fireplace, stood a man whose presence seemed to fill the entire room. Alpha King Cole. The doors clicked shut behind me with a finality that stopped my heart. I was trapped in a gilded cage with a monster. And my real nightmare was only just beginning. He didn't turn to face me immediately. For a long moment, there was only the crackling of the fire and the thundering of my own heartbeat. I kept my eyes lowered as instructed, staring at the intricate patterns woven into the rug beneath my feet, but I could feel his presence like a physical weight pressing against my chest. When he finally moved, it was with a slow, deliberate grace that reminded me he was predator first, man second. "Look at me." His voice was deeper than I'd expected, rough like gravel wrapped in velvet. It wasn't a request. I forced my eyes upward. Past broad shoulders draped in a black silk shirt, past the strong column of his throat, until I met his gaze. Golden eyes, wolf eyes. They stared at me with an intensity that made me want to disappear into the floor. Cole was beautiful in the way a sword is beautiful, all sharp edges and deadly precision. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his features were carved with such masculine perfection they seemed almost cruel. But it was the emptiness in those golden eyes that truly terrified me. He looked at me the way one might look at a painting, analyzing every detail with clinical detachment. "Come closer," he commanded. My feet moved before my mind could protest, carrying me across the vast chamber until I stood within arm's reach of him. He was taller than I'd anticipated, forcing me to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. The scent of him, pine and smoke and something wild, wrapped around me like invisible chains. He reached out suddenly, and I flinched. But he didn't strike me. Instead, his fingers caught a strand of my silver hair, rubbing it between his thumb and forefinger as if testing its reality. "Remarkable," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. "Even the texture is the same." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned abruptly and strode to the far wall. With a swift motion, he pulled a velvet covering from something I hadn't noticed in the shadows, a massive gilded frame that had been concealed. The portrait it revealed stole the breath from my lungs. A woman stared back at me from the canvas, rendered in oils with such skill she seemed almost alive. Silver hair cascaded over her shoulders in waves identical to mine. Her eyes were the same shade of blue, that unusual pale blue like winter ice. The structure of her face, the curve of her lips, the delicate arch of her brows. It was like looking into a mirror that showed me dressed in ancient finery. But it wasn't me. "V," Cole breathed, and the name came out like a prayer and a curse combined. He dropped to his knees before the portrait with a violence that made me jump. His broad shoulders began to shake, and then, God's help me, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom began to sob. The sound was raw and broken, like something wounded and dying. He reached up with trembling hands to touch the frame, his fingers tracing the painted features with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "I'm sorry," he gasped, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I'm so sorry, my love. I should have protected you. I should have known. I should have." His voice splintered into incoherent grief, and I stood frozen, unsure whether I was witnessing something sacred or profane. This wasn't the monster from the stories. This was a man shattered by loss, broken into pieces that would never fit back together properly. I should have felt pity. Instead, cold dread crept through my veins like poison. "Your Majesty," I whispered, my voice barely audible over his ragged breathing. "I don't understand. Who?" "V," he said the name again, louder this time, his head snapping toward me with such sudden focus that I stumbled backward. "You came back to me. I knew you would. I knew death couldn't keep you from me." My blood turned to ice. "My lord, I'm not." "Don't." He surged to his feet with frightening speed, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. His hands gripped my shoulders, not painfully, but with desperate urgency. "Don't leave me again. I can't. I won't survive it a second time." Up close, I could see the madness swimming in his golden eyes, the grief that had rotted into something twisted and consuming. He stared at my face like a drowning man staring at the surface of the water, so close yet always out of reach. "I'm Je," I said, my voice shaking. "My name is Je, I'm not." "They took you from me 5 years ago," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken at all. His thumbs traced the line of my jaw with unsettling gentleness. 5 years of darkness, of emptiness, but I never stopped looking for you. I searched everywhere, spent fortunes, made deals with creatures that should never be bargained with, and finally, the gods have shown mercy. Horror bloomed in my chest like a poisonous flower. He wasn't seeing me at all. When he looked at my face, he saw only her, the ghost woman in the portrait. "Please," I tried again, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm not V, I'm just a girl from a village. My father sold me. I'm not whoever you think I am." Something flickered in his expression, a moment of clarity fighting through the fog of his delusion. His brow furrowed, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might actually see me. But then his gaze drifted back to the portrait, to the painted woman who wore my face, and the madness returned. "You're frightened," he said, his voice softening. "Of course you are. Death must have been traumatic, but you're safe now, my love. I'll never let anyone hurt you again. Never." He released me and moved to a wardrobe I hadn't noticed, throwing it open to reveal gowns in every color, silks and velvets, each more elaborate than the last. All in styles from 5 years past, preserved like relics in a shrine. "These are yours," he said, running his hand over the fabrics with reverent care. "I kept everything exactly as you left it. Your chambers are unchanged. Your books are still on the nightstand, your hairbrush on the vanity. I've been waiting for you to come home." My chambers, her chambers, the chambers of a dead woman whose face I'd had the misfortune to be born with. I wasn't a bride. I wasn't even a person to him. I was a replacement, a living doll meant to fill the void left by someone who could never truly be replaced. "I don't want to wear her clothes," I whispered, but my voice was so small it barely existed. Cole turned back to me, and there was such pleading desperation in his eyes that it almost looked like love. Almost. "Please, V, don't fight this, don't fight us. We can have everything back, everything we lost. We can pretend the last 5 years never happened." "But I'm not her." The words burst from me in a cry of anguish that echoed off the stone walls. "I'm not V. I don't know who she was or what she meant to you, but I am not her." The silence that followed was suffocating. Cole stared at me, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might strike me, might reveal the monster the servants had whispered about. Instead, he simply nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd been thinking. "The trauma," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. "Memory loss is common after such ordeals. The healers warned me this might happen. It's all right, my love. I have enough memories for both of us. I'll help you remember who you are." Who you are, not who I was. I realized then, with a clarity that made my knees weak, that I would never convince him. The truth didn't matter. My name didn't matter. My life before this moment didn't matter. I had ceased to exist the moment I walked through those doors. Cole approached me again, this time producing a delicate silver necklace from his pocket. A moonstone pendant caught the firelight, gleaming with an otherworldly glow. "You wore this on our wedding day," he said, moving behind me to fasten it around my neck. "Do you remember?" I didn't answer, couldn't answer. The cold metal settled against my collarbone like a shackle. "You're tired," Cole decided, his hands resting on my shoulders from behind. "It's been a long journey. Your rooms are prepared. Tomorrow we'll start rebuilding what we lost, together." He guided me toward a door I hadn't noticed, one that clearly connected to the adjacent chambers. The rooms beyond were decorated in shades of cream and gold, feminine and elegant and utterly foreign to me. "Sleep well, V," he said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of my head, a gesture that should have been tender but felt like a brand. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." The door closed between us, with a gentle click. I stood alone in a dead woman's bedroom, wearing a dead woman's necklace, trapped in a palace built on grief and delusion. And I finally understood why the last woman who entered Cole's chambers had screamed for 3 days. She'd probably been trying to remind him of her name. I didn't sleep. How could I, surrounded by another woman's life like a ghost haunting someone else's memories? The bed was too soft, the silk sheets too fine, the room too perfect, like a museum exhibit of a life interrupted. Every surface held remnants of V, a leather-bound journal on the writing desk, its pages filled with elegant script I couldn't bring myself to read. A hairbrush with silver strands still caught in its bristles. Books stacked beside the bed, with pressed flowers marking pages she would never finish. When dawn finally bled through the gauzy curtains, painting the room in shades of rose and gold, I was already awake, sitting rigid in a chair by the window, still wearing the simple dress I'd arrived in. A sharp knock preceded the door opening. A woman entered carrying a breakfast tray, middle-aged, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a severe bun. She stopped short when she saw me, her expression flickering between surprise and something that looked dangerously close to pity. "Miss," she said carefully, setting the tray on a side table. "I'm Marta, head of the household staff. The Alpha King requests your presence in his study at 9 o'clock. He's asked that you..." she gestured toward the wardrobe, that you dress appropriately. In her clothes, I said flatly. Marta's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't deny it. Instead, she moved to the wardrobe and began pulling out garments, laying them across the bed with practiced efficiency. A day dress in deep emerald silk, undergarments trimmed with lace, slippers that looked like they'd never been worn. How long did you know her? I asked quietly. Marta's hands stilled on the fabric. 5 years before the incident, she was kind, gentle, nothing like... She caught herself, shaking her head. It's not my place to speak of such things. Please, I stood, moving closer. I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know who she was or what happened to her, if I'm supposed to... I couldn't finish the sentence. Replace her, become her. Marta studied my face for a long moment, and I saw the war playing out behind her eyes. Loyalty to her king versus compassion for the terrified girls standing before her. Lady V was beloved, she finally said, her voice low. By everyone in the palace, but especially by Alpha Cole. They were true mates bound by the moon itself. Rare, that kind of connection, precious. Her expression darkened. 5 years ago, during the Harvest Moon Festival, she fell from the North Tower. They said she'd been walking along the parapet. She did that sometimes when she needed to think. The stones were wet from rain. She slipped. You don't believe that? It's not about what I believe, miss. It's about what can be proven. Marta's voice dropped to barely a whisper. But there were others in the tower that night, members of the council, and Lady V had been asking questions she shouldn't have been asking, looking into matters that made powerful people uncomfortable. A chill ran down my spine. They killed her. No one knows what truly happened. The Alpha King found her body himself. They say his howl shook the very foundations of the palace, that wolves for miles around felt his anguish. He hasn't been the same since. Some say grief broke him. Others say guilt did. She caught my arm gently. Tread carefully, child. This palace has shadows within shadows, and you wear the face of a woman who learned its secrets. Before I could respond, she released me and stepped back, her professional mask sliding into place. You should prepare yourself. The Alpha King doesn't appreciate tardiness. The emerald dress fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. I stared at my reflection in the full-length mirror and saw V staring back. The resemblance was uncanny enough to make my skin crawl. Cole's study was in the East Wing, accessible through a series of corridors lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings and their Lunas. I walked past them with a servant as my guide, a young man who kept his eyes averted and maintained a careful distance, as if I carried some contagion. The study doors were already open. Cole stood behind a massive mahogany desk, reviewing documents with the same intense focus he'd given the portrait last night. He looked up as I entered, and something flickered across his face, satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. Much better, he said, gesturing for me to approach. That dress always brought out the color of your eyes. I bit back the correction that wanted to leap from my tongue. Pick your battles, I reminded myself. Survive first, fight later. Sit, he commanded, indicating a chair across from him. I obeyed, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. Cole settled into his own chair with the relaxed confidence of a man completely in control. We need to establish certain parameters for our arrangement. I want us to understand each other perfectly. I'm listening. You will reside in V's chambers. You will wear her clothes, her jewelry. When we appear in public, and we will appear in public, you will stand at my side as Luna. You'll attend council meetings, state dinners, ceremonies. You will smile when expected, remain silent unless I indicate otherwise, and conduct yourself with the grace and dignity befitting your position. My position as a living mannequin, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes flashed dangerously. Your position as my mate. I'm not your mate. I'm not even here by choice. Choice, Cole repeated, leaning back in his chair. Your father made a choice when he signed that contract. I made a choice when I paid his debts. You're here because of choices, just not yours. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. At least he'd used my real name, though I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. In return for your cooperation, he continued, his tone becoming businesslike. You'll have every comfort this palace can provide. Fine food, beautiful clothes, servants to attend your needs. You'll want for nothing material. Except freedom. Freedom is overrated. Safety, security, purpose, those have far more value. I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised us both. Safety, you're last. Acquisition screamed for 3 days before they carried her out. That's what the driver told me. Something dark passed over Cole's features. Lydia was unsuitable. She looked similar, but the resemblance was superficial. You, however. He leaned forward, studying me with unnerving intensity. You're perfect. The hair, the eyes, the structure of your face. Even your voice has the same musical quality. It's as if the gods themselves heard my prayers and sent you back to me. I'm not her, I whispered, though I knew it was futile. Not yet, he agreed. But you will be. Memory returns in time. Until then, I'll be patient. He stood and moved around the desk, and I forced myself not to recoil as he approached. Cole reached out, tucking a strand of silver hair behind my ear with unexpected gentleness. There are only a few rules you need to remember, he said softly. Wear what I provide, go where I tell you, speak when spoken to, and above all, do not attempt to leave the palace grounds. The guards have orders to stop anyone matching your description, for your own protection, of course. Of course, I echoed hollowly. As for the more intimate aspects of our arrangement, his hand dropped away. I won't touch you that way, not until you remember who you truly are. V deserves better than to be claimed by someone she doesn't remember loving. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only the suffocating weight of impossible expectations. What if I never remember? I asked. What if I can't become whoever you want me to be? Cole's expression hardened. Then you'll learn to pretend convincingly. One way or another, you will fulfill the role you were brought here to play. The alternative... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. A knock at the door saved me from having to respond. Marta entered, bowing slightly. Forgive the interruption, Alpha King. The council representatives have arrived for the morning session. Excellent. Cole straightened, his demeanor shifting into something more regal and commanding. V will be joining us. Marta's eyes widened fractionally, but she simply nodded. Of course, my lord. As I followed Cole through the palace corridors toward the council chambers, servants stopped and stared. Some whispered behind their hands. Others simply gaped, their faces reflecting shock and confusion and unmistakable pity. They all knew. They understood what I was, a replacement, a stand-in, a living monument to one man's inability to let go of the past. And if the whispers were true, if V really had been murdered for asking too many questions, then I was walking in the footsteps of a dead woman toward a fate that might mirror her own. The gilded cage Cole had promised suddenly felt very much like a tomb. The council dining hall was a cathedral of excess, vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of ancient wolf hunts, crystal chandeliers that scattered light like captured stars, and a table long enough to seat 30 carved from a single enormous tree. I sat at Cole's right hand, positioned like a trophy on display, wearing a gown of midnight blue that Marta had assured me was one of V's favorites. 7 council members occupied the far end of the table, each one radiating the kind of power that came from generations of privilege and political maneuvering. They'd been watching me since we entered, their scrutiny as sharp as scalpels, dissecting every gesture and expression. Elder Thaddeus, silver-haired and distinguished, held court at the opposite end. It's been too long since we've had a Luna grace these halls, he said, raising his wine glass in my direction. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The resemblance is quite extraordinary. Indeed, murmured Elder Celeste, a severe woman whose tight bun pulled her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. One might almost believe. That's enough, Cole cut in, his voice carrying a warning edge. We're here to discuss the Northern Territories, not indulge in speculation. The conversation shifted to border disputes and trade routes, topics that might have interested me under different circumstances. But I was too focused on maintaining the illness I'd been practicing all day, back straight, expression serene, hands folded delicately in my lap. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Be seen, not heard. A living portrait. The food arrived in waves: roasted pheasant with herbs I couldn't name, vegetables glazed in butter and honey, bread so fresh it steamed when broken. I picked at my plate, stomach too knotted to appreciate flavors that probably cost more than my village saw in a month. "The Luna seems to have lost her appetite," observed Elder Marcus, a portly man with shrewd eyes. "I recall Lady V being quite fond of Cook's pheasant preparation." Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't betray my ignorance, Cole placed his hand over mine on the table. The gesture was possessive, protective. "She's still recovering. Give her time." The weight of his hand should have felt reassuring. Instead, it felt like another shackle. Elder Thaddeus launched into a tedious anecdote about a hunting expedition from decades past, embellishing details with the self-importance of someone who enjoyed hearing himself talk. The other elders politely pretended interest, offering rehearsed chuckles at appropriate intervals. And then Lord Bavian, gods rest his soul, actually tried to shoot the deer with his eyes closed. Thaddeus exclaimed, pausing for effect. Can you imagine? He claimed it would prove his wolf senses were superior to his human sight. Naturally, he missed entirely and nearly took off Lord Hendrick's ear instead. The elders erupted in polite laughter, the kind of controlled amusement that came from hearing the same story too many times. But there was something about the image, a pompous lord shooting blindly into the woods, nearly maiming his companion through sheer stupidity, that struck me as genuinely absurd. Before I could stop myself, a laugh bubbled up from my chest. Not a delicate, restrained sound, but a genuine bark of amusement that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. The elders stared with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. Cole's hand tightened over mine, but I barely noticed. I'd clapped my free hand over my mouth, mortified, but the damage was done. Elder Celeste's eyebrows had climbed so high they'd nearly disappeared into her hairline. "How?" Spirited. "Lady V always found that particular story distasteful," Elder Marcus said slowly, his eyes narrowing. "She felt making light of Lord Bavian's eccentricities was beneath the dignity of the council." My stomach dropped. Of course. Of course V would have been too proper, too refined to laugh at something so crude. I'd broken character, shattered the illusion Cole had worked so hard to maintain. I forced myself to meet his gaze, bracing for anger. But what I saw in those golden eyes wasn't rage, it was something far more complex. Surprise, confusion, and beneath it all, a spark of something that looked almost like curiosity. For the first time since I'd arrived, Cole was actually seeing me. Not V's ghost wearing my skin, but me, the girl who found stupid hunting stories funny, who couldn't maintain a perfect mask of aristocratic composure. The moment stretched between us, fragile and electric. Then Cole cleared his throat and withdrew his hand. "My mate has been under considerable strain," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Perhaps we should conclude this evening's proceedings." The elders exchanged glances but didn't argue. Within minutes, they'd made their excuses and departed, leaving Cole and me alone in the cavernous hall save for the servants clearing dishes in the shadows. I expected him to berate me, to remind me of the rules I'd so carelessly violated. Instead, he simply sat back in his chair, studying me with that same unsettling intensity. "You found that funny," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." V hated that story. She told Thaddeus once that glorifying incompetence normalized dangerous behavior. The ghost of something, not quite a smile, flickered across his features. She wasn't wrong, but she took everything so seriously. Even humor required purpose and dignity. I didn't know how to respond. Was this a test? A trap? Cole stood abruptly. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. I rose on unsteady legs and followed him through the palace corridors, past the formal wings into sections I hadn't yet seen. These hallways were quieter, less ornate. more lived in. We ended up in a glass-enclosed conservatory where moonlight filtered through the panels and illuminated an indoor garden. Roses climbed trellises, their scent heavy in the humid air. A fountain bubbled in the center, the sound of water soothing in the silence. Cole stopped before a bench and gestured for me to sit. When I obeyed, he surprised me by sitting beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, but not touching. "Tell me about yourself," he said quietly. I stared at him. "What?" "Your village, your life before you came here. What made you laugh before tonight?" The request was so unexpected that I couldn't immediately formulate a response. Cole had spent the last 2 days insisting I was someone else, denying my identity at every turn. Now he wanted to know about the person he'd been erasing. "Why?" I asked warily. His jaw clenched. Because for a moment at that table, I saw someone I didn't recognize, and I realized I know nothing about the woman living in my palace, the woman wearing V's clothes and sleeping in her bed. He turned to face me fully. "So tell me, who are you, Ja?" My name. He'd used my actual name without prompting, without that distant tone that suggested he was humoring a delusion. I proceeded carefully, testing the waters. "I grew up in Millbrook, small village 3 days' ride from here. My mother died when I was young, fever took her one winter. After that, it was just my father and me." I paused, gauging his reaction. He was listening intently, his expression unreadable. "I worked at the village bakery. Started when I was 12, kneading dough before dawn. The baker, Mrs. Chen, used to let me experiment with spice combinations on the day-old bread." "What did you create?" Cole asked, and there was genuine interest in his voice. "Cinnamon and cardamom twists. They were terrible at first. I used too much cardamom and they tasted like soap. But eventually I got the balance right. Mrs. Chen said they were good enough to sell." A genuine smile tugged at my lips despite everything. She was probably just being kind, but it made me feel like I'd accomplished something, like I had value beyond just being my father's daughter. Cole's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "V couldn't cook to save her life. She once tried to make tea and somehow managed to burn the water." I let out a surprised laugh. "How is that even possible?" "I never figured it out. She claimed the kettle was defective." For a moment, something warm flickered in his eyes, a genuine memory, untainted by grief. Then it died, snuffed out by returning guilt. "She had other talents, strategy, diplomacy. She could negotiate trade agreements that would take seasoned politicians months to untangle." The walls were going back up. I could see it happening, watch him retreat behind the fortress of his grief. "I'm not her," I said softly. "I can't be her. I don't have her grace or her intelligence or her political mind. I'm just a baker's assistant who laughed too loudly at dinner and doesn't know which fork to use for fish courses." Cole stood abruptly, putting distance between us. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This was a mistake." "What was?" "Asking about you, learning about you. It only makes this more complicated." "More complicated than pretending I'm your dead mate." The words came out sharper than I intended. He spun to face me, and the anguish in his expression made my breath catch. "You don't understand. I failed her, Ja. I was supposed to protect her and I failed. She died because I wasn't vigilant enough, wasn't strong enough. Every day I wake up knowing that if I'd been better, faster, smarter, she'd still be alive." "So you bought someone who looks like her to punish yourself," I said, understanding dawning. "This isn't about bringing her back. It's about torturing yourself with what you lost." "No, He stopped, the denial dying on his lips. His shoulders sagged. "I don't know anymore. At first, yes. When my emissary sent word that he'd found you, I thought maybe the gods were giving me a second chance, a way to undo my failures, but now." "Now?" He looked at me with such raw vulnerability that it hurt. "Now I'm starting to realize I can't undo the past, and trying to is only creating new cruelties." Hope flared in my chest. "Then let me go. Release me from this arrangement. I'll disappear, and you'll never have to see V's face looking back at you from a stranger." Cole's expression hardened. "No." "But you just said." "I said I'm starting to realize certain truths. That doesn't mean I'm capable of acting on them." He moved toward the conservatory door, each step measured and deliberate. "You'll continue to fulfill your role. I'll continue too." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. "Continue to what?" I demanded. "Pretend I'm someone I'm not. Force yourself to see a ghost instead of a person." He paused at the threshold, his back to me. "Go to bed, Ja. Tomorrow we have a state function to attend. Wear the silver gown. It was always V's favorite for formal events." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the moonlit garden with the scent of roses and the bitter taste of almost progress. For a few precious moments, Cole had seen me, really seen me. And it had terrified him so completely that he'd fled. I sat in the conservatory long after he left, listening to the fountain and wondering if that brief crack in his armor was the beginning of something new, or just another way for hope to hurt me. The palace gardens were a labyrinth of manicured hedges and flowering vines, pathways that twisted through sections dedicated to different seasons and scents. Marta had suggested a morning walk might help settle my nerves after another sleepless night, and I'd agreed, desperate for anything that didn't involve sitting in V's chambers staring at V's belongings while wearing V's clothes. 2 guards trailed at a respectful distance, a precaution Cole had insisted upon, though whether to protect me or prevent my escape, I couldn't say. The morning air was crisp, carrying the perfume of late-blooming jasmine and something earthier, like rich soil after rain. I found myself gravitating toward a section Marta called the Moon Garden, where white and silver flowers bloomed exclusively. Gardenias, moonflowers, white roses that seemed to glow in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. It was beautiful in a haunting way, like everything else in this palace. A stone bench sat beneath a weeping willow, its trailing branches creating a natural curtain of privacy. I settled onto the cool stone, finally alone with my thoughts for the first time in days. The guards had stopped at the garden's entrance, maintaining their watch but granting me the illusion of solitude. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds wash over me, birdsong, the distant splash of a fountain, the whisper of wind through leaves. For just a moment, I could almost pretend I was back in Millbrook, sitting behind the bakery on my break, before my father's weakness had sold me into this beautiful nightmare. The whisper of displaced air was my only warning. My eyes snapped open to find a figure in black lunging from the willow's concealing branches, a blade gleaming in their gloved hand. Time seemed to slow, each detail crystallizing with horrible clarity. The assassin's face obscured by a dark mask, the way the dagger caught the light, the certainty in their movements that spoke of professional training. I threw myself sideways, the stone bench my only shield. The blade struck where my throat had been a heartbeat before, sparks flying as metal met stone with a screech that shattered the garden's serenity. I opened my mouth to scream, but terror had stolen my voice. The assassin recovered with frightening speed, pivoting for another strike. This one would find its mark. I was trapped between the bench and the willow, with nowhere left to run. Then a blur of motion erupted from the garden path. Cole hit the assassin like a battering ram, his shoulder driving into their midsection with bone-crushing force. They went down in a tangle of limbs, the dagger skittering across the flagstones. The guards were shouting now, their footsteps thundering closer, but Cole didn't wait for backup. His fist connected with the assassin's jaw with a crack that made me flinch. Once, twice, 3 times, each blow fueled by a rage so primal it transformed him into something more beast than man. His eyes had gone completely gold, wolf surging to the surface, and when he snarled, I could see fangs elongating. "Cole, stop!" I found my voice finally, terrified he'd kill them before we could learn who sent them. "We need them alive." My words cut through his fury just enough. He grabbed the assassin by the throat, lifting them off the ground with one hand, claws extending where fingers should have been. "Who sent you?" The words came out distorted, more growl than speech. The assassin remained silent, even as their air supply dwindled. The guards reached us then, weapons drawn. Cole tossed the would-be killer toward them like discarded refuse. "Take them to the dungeons. I want answers within the hour." As the guards dragged the unconscious assassin away, Cole's transformation reversed itself in shuddering waves. The gold bled from his eyes, claws retracted, fangs receded. But his hands were still shaking when he turned to face me. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, scraped raw. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the reality of what had almost happened hit me like a physical blow. Someone had tried to kill me, not frighten me or warn me, actually end my life. My legs gave out. Cole caught me before I hit the ground, scooping me up as if I weighed nothing. I should have protested, maintained some dignity, but shock had robbed me of coherent thought. Instead, I found myself clutching his shirt, my fingers twisting in the fabric as tremors racked my body. "I've got you," he murmured, and something in his tone was different, softer. "You're safe, Ja, I won't let anyone hurt you." Ja, he'd said my name, not V's, mine. He carried me through the gardens, past gawking servants and alarmed guards, into the palace and up a flight of stairs I didn't recognize. Not toward V's chambers, I realized dimly. These were his private rooms. The space was austere compared to the rest of the palace, functional rather than decorative. Dark furniture, minimal ornamentation, everything chosen for purpose rather than beauty. He set me down on a leather sofa near the fireplace, then disappeared briefly before returning with a crystal decanter and 2 glasses. "Drink this," he commanded, pressing a glass of amber liquid into my hands. "It'll help with the shock." I obeyed, gasping as the whiskey burned down my throat. The warmth spread through my chest, pushing back the cold that had settled into my bones. Cole poured himself a measure and downed it in one swallow, then poured another. His jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. "This shouldn't have happened. You were supposed to be safe here." "Safe," I laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. "Someone just tried to gut me in your garden. How is that safe?" "The guards should have been closer. I should have assigned more. I should have." He cut himself off, slamming the glass down on the side table hard enough that I was surprised it didn't shatter. I failed again. Understanding clicked into place. "This isn't about me. You're thinking about her, about how you failed to protect V." His eyes snapped to mine, and I saw the truth written there. Every time I close my eyes, I see her body at the base of that tower, broken, gone, and I wasn't there. I was in a council meeting, arguing about trade routes and border disputes while she was dying. "But I'm not her," I said, setting down my own glass with deliberate care. "I'm not V, Cole. What happened to her wasn't your fault, and what almost happened to me today wasn't either. You can't protect everyone from everything." "I can damn well try." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration rolling off him in waves. "Especially when someone in my own palace wants you dead." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. "You think it was one of the council." "The assassin was too skilled, too well-informed. They knew your routine. Knew which guards were on duty, knew exactly where the blind spots in the garden were." His golden eyes met mine, and in them I saw the calculated mind of an alpha king rather than a grief-stricken widower. This was an inside job. My stomach churned. "But why? I'm nobody. Just a girl you bought to play dress-up in a dead woman's clothes. What possible threat could I pose?" Cole moved to the window, staring out at the gardens where I'd nearly died. "I've been asking myself the same question since the moment I pulled that bastard off you." He was quiet for a long moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Unless they think you're actually her." "What?" "V died under suspicious circumstances. There was never a proper investigation. The council shut it down, called it a tragic accident, and insisted we move forward. But what if whoever killed her thinks she somehow survived? What if they see you and panic, believing their first attempt failed?" I stood on shaking legs, joining him at the window. "That's insane. They'd have to be blind not to see the differences. I'm nothing like her." "You're more like her than you realize," Cole said quietly. "The way you hold yourself when you're thinking, the tilt of your head when you're listening. Small things I didn't notice at first because I was too busy seeing what I wanted to see." He turned to face me fully. "But someone who killed V might only see the surface, might see a threat that needs eliminating." "So what do we do?" We find out who sent that assassin, and then we find out why they wanted V dead 5 years ago. His expression hardened into something dangerous. And if they're the same people, I'll tear them apart myself. A knock at the door interrupted us. Cole called permission to enter, and the head guard stepped inside, his face grim. "The prisoner is dead, my lord." "What?" Cole's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Poison capsule hidden in a false tooth. They bit down before we could stop them." The guard's jaw clenched. Professional, they were never going to talk. Cole's fist slammed into the wall beside the window, leaving a crater in the plaster. I jumped, but he didn't seem to notice the damage, or the blood now trickling from his knuckles. "Search their body for any identifying marks. Question every servant who had access to the gardens today. I want names, schedules, anything unusual." His voice was pure command now, the broken, grieving man from our earlier conversations buried beneath layers of authority. "And double the guard on J's chambers. No one enters or leaves without my explicit permission." "Yes, Alpha King." The guard bowed and retreated, leaving us alone again. Cole examined his bleeding knuckles absently, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "You should rest. Today has been traumatic," I supplied. "Terrifying, nearly fatal." "All of those." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Je." My name again, twice in one conversation. Something was shifting. "Thank you for stopping me. If I'd killed that assassin in my rage, we'd have lost our only lead." "You saved my life," I said softly. "I think we're even." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his features. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start hunting whoever wants you dead. And this time..." His eyes flashed gold for just a moment. "This time I won't fail." After he left, I sank back onto the sofa, my mind racing. Someone wanted me dead badly enough to send a professional killer. The same someone who likely murdered V 5 years ago. I wasn't just a replacement anymore. I was a target. And somewhere in this palace of secrets and shadows, the person who'd orchestrated it all was watching, waiting for their next opportunity to finish what they'd started. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the assassin's blade arcing toward my throat, felt the cold certainty of imminent death. The guards Cole had posted outside my door were meant to be reassuring, but their presence only reminded me that someone in this palace wanted me dead. At midnight, I gave up the pretense of rest and wrapped myself in a velvet robe I'd found in V's wardrobe. The palace at night was a different creature. Shadows pooled in corners like living things, and the silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I wandered without destination, drawn by restless energy and the need to feel less trapped. The corridors I'd been shown were familiar now, but there were entire sections of the palace I'd never seen. Wings that servants hurried past without looking, doors that remained perpetually closed. I found myself in the north wing, where the architecture grew older, more Gothic. The portraits here were faded, their subjects stern-faced ancestors who seemed to judge me from their frames. Dust motes danced in the moonlight streaming through tall windows, and the air tasted stale, as if this part of the palace didn't often see visitors. At the end of a particularly long corridor, I found what I'd been unconsciously seeking: a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf motifs, sealed with a heavy iron lock. Unlike the rest of the palace, these doors were adorned with fresh mountain laurel, white blooms that symbolized remembrance in wolf culture. Someone still tended this place, still honored whatever lay beyond. "You shouldn't be here, miss." I spun to find a young servant girl emerging from a side passage, carrying a bundle of fresh laurel. She couldn't have been more than 16, with wide eyes that reflected both fear and curiosity. "I couldn't sleep," I said, which was true enough. "I was just walking." The girl glanced nervously down the corridor, then moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "These were Lady V's private chambers. The Alpha King had them sealed after the incident. No one's been inside for 5 years except old Marta, and she only comes to dust once a month." My pulse quickened. "What's inside?" "Everything, just as she left it. He couldn't bear to change anything, to admit she was really gone. The girl's eyes filled with sympathy that seemed directed at me rather than the absent V. You look so much like her, it's frightening. Are you truly his new Luna, or are you another ghost haunting these halls? I'm not sure anymore, I admitted. What's your name? Ilara, miss. She set down her bundle of laurel and produced a key from her apron pocket. I'm not supposed to have this. Stole it from Marta's ring last week, meant to return it, but… She bit her lip. You have a right to know who you're supposed to be replacing, and maybe there are things in there the Alpha King doesn't want found. You could lose your position, I said, even as hope flared in my chest. Worse if Cole finds out. He won't, not if you're quick. Ilara slid the key into the lock. Besides, after what happened in the garden today, I figure you deserve answers. We all do. The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. The doors swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a chamber frozen in time. Moonlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that managed to be both grand and intimate. Unlike the rest of the palace's Gothic severity, these rooms had warmth, plush rugs in deep crimson, tapestries depicting forests rather than battles, furniture chosen for comfort rather than intimidation. But it was the dust motes swirling in the air, and the faint smell of decay beneath perfume that reminded me this was a mausoleum, not a home. I'll keep watch, Ilara whispered. You have maybe 20 minutes before the patrol circles back. I stepped inside, and the doors closed softly behind me. The sitting room was arranged as if V might return at any moment. A book lay open on a side table, a ribbon marking a page she'd never finish. Embroidery sat abandoned in a basket, the needle still threaded. A tea service on a tray, the liquid long since evaporated, leaving only stains in delicate porcelain. I moved through the space like an intruder at a funeral, careful not to disturb anything. The bedroom was worse. The bed still made, a nightgown laid out across the coverlet, slippers positioned beside the bed as if waiting for feet that would never fill them. On the vanity, I found what made my breath catch. A silver-backed brush, strands of hair still caught in the bristles. I lifted it with trembling hands, comparing the silvery strands to my own hair. Identical. The resemblance wasn't just uncanny, it was impossible. But it was the writing desk that drew me like a magnet. Papers lay scattered across its surface, and among them, a leather-bound journal with V's initials embossed in gold. VM. My hands shook as I opened it. The first entry was dated 6 years ago, written in elegant script that spoke of education and refinement I'd never possessed. Met him today. Alpha King Cole, though he insists I call him just Cole in private. His eyes are the color of amber in sunlight, and when he smiles, which is rare, it transforms his entire face. I think I could love him. I think perhaps I already do. I flipped forward, skimming entries about their courtship, their mating ceremony, the early days of their bond. V's love for Cole radiated from every word, genuine and deep and achingly real. This wasn't a political arrangement or a strategic alliance. This was true mates finding each other. Which made her death all the more tragic. The entries grew darker as I progressed. V began noticing things, inconsistencies in council reports, trade agreements that benefited certain elders disproportionately, whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Elder Thaddeus met with the Shadowmere Pack representatives again. I saw them in the East Gardens, their heads closed together like conspirators. When I asked Cole about it, he said it was routine border negotiation. But why conduct routine negotiations in secret? Why dismiss the pack historian who would normally document such meetings? I turned pages faster now, watching V's suspicions crystallize into certainty. I found the records Elder Marcus claimed were destroyed in the fire. They weren't destroyed. They were hidden in the archives under false dates. Someone has been embezzling from the pack treasury for years, siphoning funds into accounts I can't trace. The amounts are staggering, if Cole knew. Thaddeus knows I suspect something. He cornered me after the council meeting, asked pointed questions about my research interests. His smile never reached his eyes. I need to be more careful. The prophecy. I found a reference in the forbidden section of the library. When the silver wolf returns, she will either unite the packs or burn them all. I don't understand what it means, but Elder Celeste nearly had a seizure when she caught me reading it. She confiscated the book, claimed it was heretical nonsense. But her hands were shaking. Why would a legend frighten her so much? My fingers found the final entry, dated 5 years ago, the day V died. The handwriting was rushed, almost illegible, so different from the careful script of earlier entries. They know I know. Found my hidden copies of the financial records missing this morning. Only 4 people knew where I kept them, and 3 are on the council. I'm meeting with a contact tonight who claims to have proof of the full extent of the conspiracy. If something happens to me, trust no one. Not even those closest to Cole. They may be compromised. Protect the bloodline. The prophecy must not. The entry ended mid-sentence. Not just unfinished. The page was torn, ragged edges showing where someone had ripped away whatever came next. My hands trembled as I stared at those final words. Protect the bloodline. What bloodline? And why tear away that specific page unless it contained something damning? A soft knock made me jump. Alara's voice filtered through the door. "Miss, you need to leave. Now, the patrol's early." I shoved the journal into the deep pocket of my robe, guilt and necessity warring in my chest. Cole would be furious if he knew I'd taken it, but these were answers. Dangerous, terrifying answers about why V died, and possibly why someone wanted me dead too. I slipped out of the chambers just as voices echoed down the corridor. Ilara pulled me into an alcove, pressing a finger to her lips. 2 guards passed within feet of us, their conversation carrying in the quiet. Alpha King's looking for her. Checked her chambers twice already, right agitated. The new Luna. Can't blame her for wandering after what happened today. I'd have nightmares too. Their footsteps faded. Ilara exhaled slowly. Go, quickly, and miss. Her young face was grave beyond her years. Be careful who you trust. Lady V learned that lesson too late. I hurried back through the corridors, clutching the journal against my chest like a talisman. My mind raced with implications. V hadn't died in an accident. She'd been murdered because she'd uncovered a conspiracy within the council. The same council members who smiled at me across dinner tables and called me by a dead woman's name. And now someone thought I was either V returned or privy to her secrets. Either way, I was a loose end that needed tying off. I reached my chambers just as Cole's voice called out behind me. Where were you? I turned, trying to appear calm despite my racing heart. He stood in the corridor, still dressed despite the late hour, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Couldn't sleep, I said, which was becoming my standard excuse. I went to the kitchens for warm milk. His eyes searched my face, and I wondered if he could see the lie there. But whatever he saw made him soften slightly. You should have called for a servant. It's not safe for you to wander alone. I had guards following me the whole time. I lied smoothly, hoping he wouldn't check. Cole moved closer, and I resisted the urge to step back, to hide the journal-shaped bulge in my robe pocket. I wanted to check on you, make sure you were coping after today. I'm alive, I said. That's more than I expected when I arrived here. Something flickered in his expression, guilt, maybe, or regret. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Sleep well. Tomorrow we'll discuss increased security measures. He turned to leave, then paused. Anja, thank you for reminding me to see you. Not her, not the ghost, you. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with stolen secrets and the growing certainty that I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a grieving alpha's delusion. I locked my door and pulled out V's journal, rereading that final entry by candlelight. Protect the bloodline. The prophecy must not. What prophecy? What bloodline? And most terrifying of all, did the answers to those questions explain why I looked exactly like a dead woman? I found Cole in his private study at dawn, surrounded by maps and reports, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as I had. He looked up when I entered without knocking, surprise and irritation warring on his features. I'm in the middle of. I slammed V's journal onto his desk, the leather binding landing with a thud that silenced him mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to the journal, recognition flaring immediately. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" "From her chambers, the ones you've kept locked and sealed like a shrine for 5 years." Cole stood slowly, his movements controlled but his hands clenching into fists. "You had no right. Those rooms are private, sacred." "She was murdered, Cole." My voice shook with anger and fear and the exhaustion of carrying this secret through the night. "V didn't fall from that tower. She was killed because she discovered something the council didn't want exposed. It's all in there. The embezzlement, the conspiracy, everything." "You don't know what you're talking about." But his voice lacked conviction, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Read the last entry, the one dated the day she died." I flipped the journal open to the torn page, shoving it toward him. "Tell me that sounds like a woman planning an evening stroll on a wet parapet. Tell me that sounds like an accident." Cole's hands trembled as he gripped the journal, his eyes scanning V's final words. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. The way his shoulders sagged, the sharp intake of breath, the flash of anguish that crossed his features before hardening into rage. 5 years, he whispered. 5 years I blamed myself for not being there, for failing to protect her from a tragic accident. And all this time. "They murdered her," I said quietly. "And then they let you believe it was your fault. Let you tear yourself apart with guilt while they sat across from you at council meetings and pretended to mourn." The journal hit the desk with enough force to scatter the maps. Cole turned away, his hands gripping the edge of the window frame so tightly I heard the wood crack. I should have known, should have questioned, but I was so consumed by grief, so broken, that I accepted their narrative without investigation. "You couldn't have known they'd be capable of." "I'm the Alpha King." His roar shook the windows, centuries of wolf power reverberating in his voice. "It's my job to protect my pack, to root out corruption and treachery. And instead, I let my mate's killers sit in positions of power for 5 years while I wallowed in self-pity and..." He spun to face me, and the raw anguish in his expression stole my breath. "And then I compounded my failures by dragging you into this, by buying you like property to serve as a living memorial to my inadequacy." The truth of it hung between us, ugly and undeniable. "Why did you really bring me here?" I asked, voicing the question that had haunted me since that first night. Was it truly about replacing her, or was it about punishing yourself? Cole's laugh was bitter. "I don't know anymore. At first I thought if I could just see her face again, hear her voice, I could find peace. But peace never came, only more pain, more guilt." He moved toward me, his eyes locked on mine with desperate intensity. "And then you started being yourself instead of a ghost, and everything became more complicated." "Complicated how?" "Because every time you laugh at something V would have found beneath her dignity, every time you speak your mind instead of maintaining perfect composure, every time you show me who Jo is rather than who I wanted you to be." He stopped, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "You make me want to stop living in the past." My breath caught. "Cole." But I don't know how. The confession seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him. I don't know how to let go of the woman I failed, the mate whose death I couldn't prevent, and I don't know how to. His hand lifted, trembling, to cup my cheek. How to allow myself to feel something for someone new without it feeling like betrayal. I leaned into his touch despite every rational instinct screaming at me to protect myself. "She wouldn't want this. Wouldn't want you trapped in grief, destroying yourself and anyone unlucky enough to look like her." "How do you know what she'd want?" But there was no anger in the question, only desperate hope that I might be right. "Because I read her journal, every entry. She loved you, Cole, truly, deeply. And that kind of love doesn't demand eternal suffering, it wants the beloved to heal, to live." His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I saw the moment his gaze dropped to my lips. The air between us charged with electricity, with possibility, with the terrifying potential of something new growing in the ruins of something lost. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I couldn't. Some part of me, the foolish part that had started caring for this broken, complicated man, wanted this. needed it. Our lips were a breath apart when he stopped, his entire body going rigid. I can't, the words were agonized. God help me, I want to, but I can't. Not yet. Not while her killers walk free and unpunished. Not while I still. He pulled away abruptly, putting the desk between us like a barricade. The loss of his warmth felt like winter descending. You should go, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Tonight is the full moon. I'll be indisposed. The guards will ensure you're safe. I wanted to argue, to push, to demand he stop hiding behind his guilt. But the shuttered look on his face told me I'd get nowhere. Instead, I simply nodded and turned toward the door. I paused, not turning around. Thank you for finding the journal, for giving me the truth, even though I've been too much of a coward to seek it myself. What will you do? What I should have done 5 years ago, start asking questions, stop trusting the wrong people. A pause, and try to become someone worthy of the second chance I don't deserve. The full moon rose like a silver coin tossed into a velvet sky. I stood at the window of my chambers, watching its ascent with uncharacteristic restlessness. My skin felt too tight, my bones aching in ways I'd never experienced. Heat built beneath my flesh, not fever but something else entirely, something primal and wild that demanded release. The moonstone pendant at my throat grew warm, then hot, pulsing in rhythm with my increasingly rapid heartbeat. Pain struck without warning, a searing agony that dropped me to my knees. My bones were breaking, reshaping, and I screamed. The sound transforming mid-cry into something inhuman. Fur erupted across my skin in silver waves. My hands became paws, claws extending from fingers that were no longer fingers. Terror flooded me. This was impossible. I was human, just human. My father had been human, my mother. But the transformation didn't care about my denials. It took me completely, turning my world into sensation and instinct. When it finally ended, I stood on 4 legs, panting, disoriented, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. A wolf stared back, but not just any wolf. My fur was pure silver, gleaming like moonlight made solid. My eyes glowed an otherworldly blue, and I was larger than any wolf had a right to be. The door to my chamber burst open. Cole stood there in partial transformation. His own shift paused mid-change at the sight of me. His golden eyes went wide with shock. Impossible, he breathed. Then he was moving, completing his shift in a blur of motion. His wolf was massive, midnight black with those same golden eyes, radiating power and dominance. An alpha in every sense. But when he approached me, it wasn't with aggression. He circled slowly, scenting the air, his posture reflecting complete bewilderment. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but only a whimper emerged. I didn't know how to control this body, didn't understand the instincts howling through my consciousness. Cole's wolf pressed close, his larger form offering support as my legs threatened to give out. The gesture was protective, almost tender. Then he did something that shocked me. He bowed his head in a gesture of respect. Respect to me. The transformation reversed as suddenly as it had come, leaving me naked and shivering on the floor. Cole shifted back simultaneously, immediately shrugging out of his shirt to drape it over me. You're a werewolf, I said stupidly, stating the obvious. So are you. His voice was hollow with shock. A silver wolf. Do you understand what this means? I shook my head, pulling his shirt tighter around myself. The prophecy V mentioned in her journal. When the silver wolf returns, she will either unite the packs or burn them all. His hands gripped my shoulders, his eyes boring into mine with fierce intensity. You're not just some random girl who happened to look like my dead mate. You're the prophecy. You're what they've been afraid of. I don't understand. I've never shifted before, never even knew I could. The moonstone. Cole's gaze dropped to the pendant still hanging around my neck, now cool against my skin. It was V's. She wore it always, said it was a family heirloom. What if? His face went pale. What if it wasn't just jewelry? What if it was suppressing something? And when you put it on? It triggered my first shift, I finished, horror dawning. But that means... It means you're connected to V somehow. By blood, by prophecy, by something we don't yet understand. Cole stood, packing like a caged wolf. And it means the people who killed her will come for you with everything they have once they realize what you are. What am I? The question came out as a whisper. Cole looked at me with an expression that mixed awe and fear in equal measure. You're either our salvation or our destruction, and I just realized, he stopped, a bitter smile twisting his lips. I brought you here thinking you were a replacement for what I lost, but you're not a replacement at all. Then what am I? You're the beginning of something far bigger than my grief, something that was set in motion long before either of us was born. He extended his hand to help me up. And if we're going to survive what's coming, we need to figure out exactly who you are and why you're here before our enemies do. I took his hand, letting him pull me to my feet. The silver wolf inside me stirred, recognition sparking between us, alpha and prophecy, past and future, colliding in ways neither of us could have anticipated. Everything had changed. And somehow, I knew there was no going back. The palace archives existed 3 levels below ground, carved into the bedrock the castle was built upon. Cole led me through passages I'd never seen, past guards who averted their eyes at the sight of us together in the pre-dawn darkness. I was still wearing his shirt over hastily donned trousers, my hair wild from the transformation, my body aching in places I didn't know could ache. The archivist was already waiting, as if he'd been summoned in the middle of the night, which I realized he probably had been. Master Cornelius was ancient, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his fingers ink-stained and gnarled. But his eyes were sharp as he studied me over half-moon spectacles. So it's true then, he said without preamble. Another silver wolf walks among us. How did you? I started. I've been archivist for 63 years, child. I know when the old magic stirs. He shuffled toward a section of shelving so deep in shadow I'd initially missed it. Come, there are things you need to see. He pulled down a tome so old the leather binding was cracking, its pages yellowed and brittle. With reverent care, he opened it to a marked section, revealing illustrations painted in faded ink, wolves rendered in silver and gold, their eyes glowing with otherworldly light. The silver wolves are not merely wolves with unusual coloring, Cornelius began, his voice taking on the cadence of a lecturer. They are vessels of ancient power, born once every century when the moon deems the packs need guidance or correction. They can unite fractured clans through sheer force of will and power, creating peace where there was only war. Or, I prompted, remembering the prophecy's darker alternative. Or they can destroy everything if the corruption runs too deep to salvage. The fire that purifies also consumes. His finger traced the illustration of a silver wolf standing atop a pile of bones. The last silver wolf appeared 200 years ago during the Schism Wars. She tried to broker peace between the warring factions. When they refused, when they chose violence over unity. He turned the page to show flames engulfing a landscape. She burned 3 territories to ash and salt. Nothing grew there for 50 years. Cole's hand found my lower back, steadying. You said V was a silver wolf. Lady V, yes, born 27 years ago during a lunar eclipse, a rare silver moon. The signs were unmistakable. Cornelius's expression grew troubled. But she died 5 years past, which should have meant another century before the next silver wolf could be born. Unless Ja isn't the next one, Cole said slowly, his mind clearly racing ahead. Unless she's something else entirely. The old archivist's eyes gleamed with the excitement of a scholar on the verge of revelation. Pull up your left sleeve, child. I hesitated, then obeyed. Cornelius took my wrist in his papery hands, turning it to expose the inside of my forearm. There, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was a birthmark I'd had my entire life. A crescent moon shape, silvery white against my skin. The mark of the lunar bloodline, he breathed. I suspected, but to see it confirmed. He released my arm and moved to another shelf, pulling down a genealogical record bound in blue silk. Tell me, child, what do you know of your mother? She died when I was 6. Fever took her one winter. The memory was hazy, more feeling than detail. My father never spoke of her family, said they'd disowned her for marrying beneath her station. Cornelius spread the genealogical record across a reading table, his finger tracing lines of descent. The Moonwright family, one of the oldest bloodlines, keepers of the lunar magic for millennia. They produced a silver wolf every few generations, far more frequently than the typical century-long gap. His finger stopped on a name that made my heart lurch. Myra Moonwright, my mother's name. She had 2 daughters, Cornelius continued. V, born during the eclipse, and a second daughter born 3 years later during a blood moon. But the second child disappeared shortly after birth. Stolen, the records claim, though no culprit was ever found. His eyes met mine with devastating certainty. That child would be 24 now, the same age as you. The archives seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. I'm not. I can't be. V's sister, Cole finished, his voice hollow with shock. That's why you look identical. That's why the resemblance is perfect down to the smallest detail. You're not a stranger who happens to share her features, you're family. But why? I gripped the table's edge, my knuckles white. Why steal a baby? Why hide me away in some backwater village with a father who... The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He wasn't my real father, was he? Cornelius shook his head. Marcus was paid handsomely to raise you as his own. To keep you hidden and ordinary. The payments came through intermediaries, but I tracked them to their source years ago when I first began to suspect. He pulled out another document, this one sealed with wax bearing the council's mark. Elder Thaddeus authorized the payments. He's been funding your concealment for 24 years. Why would he? But I knew. The prophecy. 2 silver wolves born in the same generation. That's not supposed to happen. It's never happened before, Cornelius confirmed. The prophecy speaks of 1 silver wolf who will either unite or destroy. But 2. The ancient texts have no precedent for such a thing. Some scholars theorized it would mean double the power, an unstoppable force that could reshape the entire werewolf world. And the council feared that, Cole said, his rage barely contained. So they stole Jo as an infant, hid her away, suppressed her wolf with that moonstone pendant passed through a dozen hands until it reached her by coincidence. They separated the sisters to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. But they didn't account for one thing, I said, my own anger rising to match Cole's. They didn't account for V figuring it out. That's what the torn page in her journal meant. Protect the bloodline. She discovered she had a sister. Cornelius nodded gravely. Lady V came to me 3 days before her death. She'd found fragments of the birth records, pieced together enough to know she wasn't alone. She was planning to search for you to bring you home. His voice cracked with old grief. And they killed her for it. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Everything, my entire life, had been orchestrated. My father's gambling debts that grew suspiciously worse over the years. The emissary who just happened to discover a girl with silver hair and V's face. Even Cole's obsessive need to possess me, though that part had been unplanned, a twist of fate the council couldn't have predicted. They brought me here, I said slowly, because they thought they could control me, keep me close, keep me ignorant, and if I ever became a problem. I touched my throat where the assassin's blade had nearly ended me. They'll try again, Cole said flatly. Now that you've shifted, now that the secret's out, they have to eliminate you before you can claim your full power. Before you and V. He stopped, pain flashing across his features. Before you can do what your sister never got the chance to do. Unite the packs, I whispered, or burn them all. The weight of it was suffocating. I wasn't just some random girl anymore. I was prophecy made flesh, the second half of an equation that terrified the most powerful wolves in the kingdom. We need to move against the council, Cole said, his tactical mind already strategizing. Root out everyone involved in the conspiracy. But we need proof, evidence that will convince the other packs, the territories beyond our borders. Otherwise, it's just accusations against respected elders. V was gathering that proof, I reminded him, and someone destroyed it or stole it. Not all of it. Cornelius shuffled to a locked cabinet, producing a key from around his neck. Lady V was clever. She gave me copies of the most damning documents for safekeeping. Financial records, correspondence, witness testimonies. I've kept them hidden all these years, waiting for—" He looked at me, waiting for the right moment. Cole took the documents with reverent care, his eyes scanning the pages with growing fury. "This is enough, more than enough. Thaddeus, Marcus, Celeste, they're all implicated. Embezzlement, murder, conspiracy against the crown." "It's enough to execute them," I said. "But is it enough to undo the damage, to unite pacts that have been fractured by their corruption for years?" "No," Cornelius admitted. "For that, you'd need to claim your full power. Both of you, the two silver wolves the prophecy never accounted for. Together, you'd be unstoppable." "V's dead," Cole said, pain raw in his voice. "There is no both." "Are you certain?" The archivist's question hung in the air like a challenge. "Did you see her body after the fall, or did you see what they wanted you to see?" Hope and horror warred in Cole's expression. "The burial was closed casket. They said her injuries were too severe, that I shouldn't remember her that way." "Convenient," I murmured. "What if she survived? What if they've kept her prisoner all these years, knowing that killing her outright might trigger the prophecy's failsafe?" "That's speculation without evidence," Cole said, but I could see the desperate hope kindling in his eyes. "Then we find evidence," I said firmly. "We dismantle the council's power piece by piece, and we find out the truth about V, about everything." Cole looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "You realize they'll come after you with everything they have, the moment they know you've shifted, that you understand who you really are." "Let them come." The silver wolf inside me stirred, eager and fierce. "I'm done being their pawn, their dirty secret locked away in the dark. If I'm supposed to be prophecy incarnate, then maybe it's time I started acting like it." A slow smile spread across Cole's face, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "V would have liked you." "V is me," I corrected. "Or part of me. We share blood, power, destiny." I took his hand, feeling the spark of connection between us. "And we're going to finish what she started." "First, you need to learn control," Cole said, his alpha authority reasserting itself. "A silver wolf with untrained power is as dangerous to allies as to enemies. Starting tomorrow, I train you personally. No guards, no witnesses, just us." "Tomorrow," I raised an eyebrow. "What about today?" "Today, we let the council think everything's normal. We smile and nod and pretend you're still just a pretty replacement mourning a dead woman." His eyes glinted with predatory satisfaction. "And while they're complacent, we prepare for war." Cornelius cleared his throat. "If I might make a suggestion, there's one more person who might have answers. Marta, the head of household. She was Lady V's personal attendant from childhood. If anyone knows secrets the council wanted buried, it would be her." The pieces were falling into place. A conspiracy unraveling, truths emerging from shadows, and at the center of it all, two sisters separated by death or deception, both carrying the weight of prophecy neither asked for. I was done being Je the victim, Je the replacement, Je the ghost. It was time to become something far more dangerous. It was time to become the silver wolf. The council convened at noon in the great hall, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows to paint the assembled elders in fractured colors. I sat at Cole's right hand, wearing a gown of deep sapphire that had been V's, the moonstone pendant cold against my throat. To any observer, I was the perfect picture of a docile Luna, composed, silent, ornamental. They had no idea I'd spent the morning learning to summon claws at will. Cole called the meeting to order with customary formality, discussing mundane matters, trade disputes, harvest projections, patrol schedules. I watched the elders with new eyes, seeing past their masks of respectability to the vipers beneath. Thaddeus sat directly across from me, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression benevolent. He looked like everyone's beloved grandfather, not the architect of murder and conspiracy. "There is one final matter," Cole said, his voice carefully neutral. "Recent events have brought certain irregularities to my attention, financial discrepancies spanning several years." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. I saw Thaddeus's fingers tighten almost imperceptibly on his armrest. Irregularities. Elder Celeste's voice was sharp with false concern. What sort of irregularities? Cole gestured to a servant, who brought forward the documents Cornelius had provided. Embezzlement from the pack treasury. Funds diverted through shell companies to personal accounts. The evidence is quite thorough. He began distributing copies around the table. I watched Thaddeus's face carefully, saw the moment calculation replaced his grandfatherly facade. His eyes flicked to the guards posted at the doors, then to Elder Marcus and Elder Celeste. Some silent communication passed between them. "These documents are forgeries," Thaddeus said smoothly, not even glancing at the papers before him. "Clearly fabricated by someone seeking to undermine this council's integrity." "Fabricated by whom?" Cole's voice was ice. "My deceased mate, perhaps, since these are copies of documents she compiled before her untimely death." The silence that followed was suffocating. Thaddeus's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold strategist beneath. "I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out. 5 years, apparently. Not your most impressive showing, Alpha King." Cole's hands flattened on the table, claws extending slightly. "You killed her." "V was a liability who couldn't leave well enough alone." Thaddeus stood, and I noticed other elders rising with him, Marcus, Celeste, 3 others I'd thought merely incompetent rather than complicit. "She discovered our arrangement with the Shadowmere pack, our very profitable arrangement that ensured peace along the borders while lining our coffers. She threatened to expose everything." "So you murdered her and made it look like an accident." My voice rang out clear and strong, no longer content to play the silent ornament. "And then you spent 5 years watching Cole torture himself with guilt while you sat in positions of power." Thaddeus's smile was reptilian. The guilt was merely a bonus. The real victory was ensuring he remained weak and malleable. A broken alpha is easy to control. His gaze shifted to me, analytical and cold. "But then you appeared. At first I thought it perfect, another way to keep him trapped in the past. I even facilitated your arrival, made sure your worthless father's debts grew insurmountable." The admission hit like a physical blow. "You orchestrated everything." "Not everything. I didn't anticipate Cole actually developing feelings for you. That was unfortunate." He pulled a blade from his robes, the silver glinting wickedly. "Which is why you need to die today, publicly, while attempting to assassinate the Alpha King. The tragic tale of a mad woman who believed herself to be the returned Luna, ultimately revealing herself as an agent of our enemies." The guards at the doors moved, but not to defend us. They drew their weapons and turned them inward, toward Cole and me. Bought, compromised. The conspiracy ran deeper than we'd imagined. Cole's chair crashed backward as he stood, his wolf rising to the surface. "You think I'll let you?" "You'll do nothing," Thaddeus cut in. "Because the moment you shift, my people have orders to kill every servant in this wing. How many innocent lives is your pride worth, Alpha King?" I saw Cole freeze, saw the terrible calculation in his eyes. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and unwilling to sacrifice the innocent to save himself. But I had different priorities. The silver wolf inside me had been straining against my control all morning, eager to prove itself. I let it slip its leash just enough, claws extending from my fingertips, my eyes flashing silver blue, power crackling across my skin like electricity. "You made one critical mistake, Thaddeus," I said, standing slowly. "You assumed I was just some ignorant village girl playing dress-up. You forgot to ask why I looked exactly like V." His confidence flickered. "An unfortunate genetic coincidence." "We're sisters." The revelation rippled through the room like a shockwave. "And you knew it. You're the one who stole me as an infant, who hid me away, who spent 24 years ensuring the prophecy could never be fulfilled." Thaddeus's composure shattered. "Impossible, you haven't shifted. The moonstone suppresses." "Suppressed," I corrected. "Past tense. Last night during the full moon I discovered what I really am." I touched the pendant at my throat, feeling it pulse in response to my power. "Want to see?" I didn't wait for permission. The shift took me in a rush of sensation and power, but this time I didn't fight it. I welcomed it, channeling the transformation with the control Cole had spent hours teaching me. In seconds, a silver wolf stood where I'd been, larger than any natural wolf, my fur gleaming like moonlight made solid. The assembled elders stepped back, fear replacing their arrogance. Even the corrupted guards hesitated, their weapons wavering. "Kill her," Thaddeus screamed. "Kill them both now." Chaos erupted. The guards surged forward, but Cole shifted in an explosion of power, his massive black wolf meeting them with savage efficiency. I leaped across the table, scattering documents, my teeth finding the throat of the nearest attacker before he could even raise his blade. But there were too many. For every guard we disabled, 2 more appeared. Elder Marcus shifted, a brown wolf, scarred and vicious, lunging at Cole's exposed flank. I tried to intercept, but Celeste's magic caught me, invisible chains yanking me backward. "She's a witch too," I snarled, or tried to. It came out as an enraged growl. Thaddeus advanced on me with deliberate calm, his silver blade inscribed with runes that made my skin crawl. "Spelled silver," he said conversationally. "Lethal to werewolves, fatal to silver wolves in particular. It disrupts the magic sustaining your transformation, tears you apart from the inside." He raised the blade, and I saw my death in his eyes. Cole roared, trying to break free from the 3 guards restraining him, but he was too far away. The blade descended, and something inside me said, "No." The moonstone pendant exploded with blinding light, raw power erupting from it like a dam breaking. The chains binding me shattered. The guards holding Cole were thrown backward. The very air seemed to ignite with silver fire that poured from my body in waves. I shifted back to human form, but I wasn't vulnerable. The power wrapped around me like armor, like wings, lifting me off the ground until I hovered above the chaos. The pendant had liquefied silver droplets floating around me in a corona of light. "The prophecy didn't speak of one silver wolf," I heard myself say, my voice layered with power beyond my understanding. "It spoke of the silver wolf returning, not born anew returning, and you kept her from me, separated us, weakened us both." Through the power I could feel her. V, not dead, not gone, trapped somewhere in shadow and silence but alive and waiting. The silver fire poured from me toward the walls, seeping through stone, searching. The palace itself seemed to respond, ancient magic recognizing what I was calling forth. Somewhere deep below, in dungeons that officially didn't exist, I felt her stir. Thaddeus stumbled backward, his confidence finally completely destroyed. "What have you done?" "I'm bringing my sister home," I said, "and then we're going to finish what she started." The floor beneath the great hall cracked, fissures spreading outward from where I floated. Not destruction, transformation. The palace was answering to its true Luna, to the power that had been denied it for 5 years. Cole shifted back to human form, staring at me with awe and something that might have been fear. You need to control it. This much power unleashed." "We'll burn them all," I finished, the prophecy's dark promise tasting like ash on my tongue. "Unless they surrender, unless they confess their crimes before every pack, every territory, unless they face justice for what they've done." The corrupted elders dropped to their knees, their rebellion crushed beneath the weight of power they tried so hard to prevent from awakening. Even Thaddeus, proud, arrogant Thaddeus, bent his head in defeat. "The dungeons," he whispered. "Sub-level 5, behind the silver door, she's been there all along. We couldn't kill her without triggering fail-safes in the prophecy, so we kept her, suppressed her power, made sure she couldn't escape." 5 years. They'd kept V prisoner for 5 years, let Cole believe her dead, let him suffer while she languished in darkness. The silver fire around me burned brighter, hotter, demanding vengeance, demanding blood. But through it all, I felt her, my sister, my other half, reaching back through the connection the pendant had forged. And what I felt from her wasn't rage. It was hope. "Take me to her," I commanded, my feet touching the floor as I forced the power back under control. "And pray that when she's free, she's more merciful than I'm feeling right now." Cole moved to my side, his hand finding mine despite the residual power crackling across my skin. "Together," he said simply. Together, we descended into the darkness to reclaim what had been stolen. To finally bring V home. The descent into the palace's depths felt like traveling backwards through time. The architecture grew older, cruder, until we were navigating tunnels carved from raw stone by hands that had turned to dust centuries ago. Thaddeus led, his hands bound in silver chains, Elder Marcus and Celeste following under guard. The loyal guards, those who hadn't been corrupted, flanked us with weapons drawn, their expressions grim. Cole's hand never left mine, his warmth the only thing anchoring me as the power continued to surge through my veins, demanding release. The silver wolf inside me paced restlessly, sensing its other half nearby, calling out to something that had been silent for far too long. Sublevel 5 was sealed behind a door, inscribed with suppression runes so complex they made my eyes water. The silver itself seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, designed not just to contain, but to torment. "Open it," Cole commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Thaddeus produced a key from around his neck with trembling hands. "You don't understand what you're unleashing. We kept her contained for the good of the realm. 2 silver wolves, both at full power, the prophecy says." "The prophecy says they'll either unite the packs or burn them all," I interrupted. "You chose to interpret that as a threat rather than a promise. You chose fear over faith." The key turned. The runes flared once, brilliant and blinding, then died. The door swung open on hinges that screamed from disuse. The cell beyond was a nightmare of silver and shadow. Chains hung from the ceiling and walls, inscribed with the same suppression runes as the door. And suspended in the center, barely conscious, was a figure I recognized from portraits and memories that weren't quite mine. V. She was emaciated, her silver hair matted and dull, her skin pale as death. The chains wrapped around her wrists, ankles, throat, everywhere, constant contact with spelled silver that had been slowly draining her life force for 5 years. But when her eyes opened at the sound of our approach, they still burned with that fierce intelligence I'd read in her journal. Those eyes found Cole first, and the raw emotion that crossed her ruined face made my heart shatter. Love, relief, anguish, all of it compressed into a single look. Then her gaze shifted to me and recognition flared. "Sister," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Finally, I knew you'd come." Cole moved first, his hands already reaching for the chains. "Don't touch them," I grabbed his wrist. "The runes will burn you, I need to." I didn't finish. The silver wolf surged forward, and this time I didn't fight it. The transformation took me completely, and power exploded outward in concentric waves. The runes shattered beneath the onslaught, unable to withstand the very thing they'd been designed to suppress. The chains fell away like ash, and V collapsed. Cole caught her, cradling her broken body against his chest with a tenderness that should have made me jealous. Instead, I felt only fierce protectiveness for this woman who shared my face, my blood, my destiny. "Get her out of here," I commanded, my voice still echoing with residual power as I shifted back. "Healers, now." But even as the guards moved to obey, I felt it. A wrongness spreading through the palace like poison through veins. The corruption Thaddeus and his conspirators had seeded went deeper than we'd realized, woven into the very foundations. "It's not just them," V gasped, her hand clutching Cole's shirt. "The council was just puppets. There's something else, something older. It's been using them, feeding on the discord growing stronger while we were divided." The temperature dropped precipitously. Frost spread across the stone walls, and shadows gathered in the corners with unnatural density. From the darkness came a voice that made my bones ache with its wrongness. How perceptive. 5 years of imprisonment, and still the clever little Luna sees the threads others miss. The shadows coalesced into a figure, or something wearing the shape of one. Tall, indistinct, made of darkness that hurt to look at directly. When it moved, reality seemed to flinch away from it. "What are you?" Cole demanded, placing himself between the entity and V. "I am what comes when wolves forget their purpose, when alphas choose comfort over duty, when prophecies are suppressed rather than fulfilled. The shadow thing's laughter was wind through dead trees. I am the void that grows in the absence of balance, and you, foolish children, have fed me well these 5 years. Understanding crashed over me. The conspiracy, the corruption, you orchestrated all of it, used Thaddeus and the others as pawns. They were so easy to manipulate. A whisper here about power, a suggestion there about danger. Let their fear and greed do the rest. The entity drifted closer, and the guards' weapons frosted over in their hands. I needed the silver wolves separated, weakened, one imprisoned, one ignorant, both unable to fulfill their purpose while I grew strong enough to break free from the bindings placed on me millennia ago. What bindings? V's voice was stronger now, fury burning through her weakness. The same ones that created the prophecy. The silver wolves exist to maintain balance, to prevent things like me from consuming the world. But balance requires two, life and death, creation and destruction, past and future. The shadow reached toward me with tendrils of darkness. And now that you've been reunited, now that the bonds are broken, I can finally destroy you both before you destroy me. The attack came with the speed of thought. Darkness lanced toward my heart, cold enough to stop blood in my veins. I tried to shift to defend myself, but the entity's power locked my transformation. Cole threw himself in front of me. The shadow blade meant for my heart punched through his chest instead. Time seemed to stop. Cole's eyes went wide with shock and pain as darkness spread from the wound like ink in water. No! The scream tore from my throat and V's simultaneously, our voices harmonizing in shared anguish. Cole collapsed into my arms, blood, too much blood, soaking through his shirt. His skin was already growing cold, the shadow poison spreading through his veins with terrible purpose. He gasped, his hand reaching up to cup my face. I'm sorry for everything, for buying you, for not seeing you, for... Don't, I sobbed, pressing my hand over the wound uselessly. Don't you dare apologize, don't you dare leave me now. Have to tell you? His breathing was labored, each word a struggle. Love you, not because you look like her, because you're you. Fierce and stubborn and so much braver than I ever was. Love you, should have said it sooner. His eyes began to close, and I felt the moment his heart stuttered, preparing to stop. Something inside me broke, or perhaps it finally, fully awakened. The moonstone pendant, which had reformed around my neck after its earlier explosion, shattered for the final time. But this time, what emerged wasn't just power. It was connection, memory, truth. The pendant hadn't been suppressing my abilities. It had been a prison, yes, but not for me. It had been holding V's essence, the part of her the void had tried to consume when it attacked her 5 years ago. The council had found the stone at the base of the tower, not understanding what it contained, and used it to trap her body while her spirit languished in shadow. And when I'd put it on, when it recognized the bloodline, it had been trying to reunite us all along. Power erupted from the shattered pieces, V's power and mine, combining, amplifying, becoming something exponentially greater than either alone. Silver fire filled the dungeons, driving back the shadows, burning away the corruption that had infected the palace for years. I felt V's presence beside me, no longer weak but blazing with renewed strength. Our hands found each other, and the moment we touched, the world shifted. We were no longer two separate beings. We were the silver wolves, plural, unity, balance incarnate. The power flowing through us found Cole's failing heart and surrounded it with light. The shadow poison screamed as it was burned away, purged by magic older and stronger than the void's malevolence. His wound closed, flesh knitting beneath our combined will. His eyes opened, not golden anymore, but glowing with silver fire borrowed from us. The mate bond, dormant for 5 years, snapped into place. Not just with me, not just with V, with both of us because we were no longer separate entities but two halves of the same whole. Cole gasped, his back arching as power flooded through him. When he rose, he was changed. Still alpha, still dominant, but now connected to something greater. To us, to the prophecy fulfilled. The void shrieked, its shadowy form writhing. Impossible, The prophecy spoke of one. The prophecy spoke of the silver wolf returning. V's voice rang out, stronger with our combined power. Not a new one being born. Us. We are the return. We are the balance you've been trying to prevent. Together, we raised our hands. Silver fire and shadow met in a collision that shook the palace to its foundations. The void was strong, fed on years of discord and fear, but it was fundamentally empty. And we were full of purpose, power, and the absolute certainty that this thing would not be allowed to consume our world. The battle raged through the dungeons and up into the palace proper. Corrupted guards fell. Their strings cut as the void's influence burned away. The entity tried to flee, to escape into the wider world, but we were everywhere it turned. Two bodies, one purpose, united by blood and destiny. You cannot destroy me, the void howled. I am eternal. I am the absence that will always exist. We're not trying to destroy you, I said, understanding finally clicking into place. We're trying to seal you, to restore the bindings our ancestors placed. With Cole's strength supporting us, we wove a cage of silver fire around the writhing darkness. The same symbols that had been carved into V's chains, we turned them inward, trapping the void in a prison of its own making. The entity's screams faded to whispers, then silence, as the bindings locked into place. The shadows dissipated, revealing only a small obsidian stone that fell to the dungeon floor with a sound like a closing door. Cole sealed it immediately in a silver box, inscribed with every protective rune we could think of. It's done, V breathed, and I felt our connection loosening, allowing us to become individuals again. She swayed, 5 years of imprisonment catching up to her now that the adrenaline was fading. Cole caught her, his first love, his true mate, with the same tenderness he'd shown earlier. But when he looked at me, the expression in his eyes was equally intense. How does this work? He asked quietly. The bond connects me to both of you. I can feel you both in my soul. V and I exchanged a look, and in it was understanding that transcended words. We were sisters. We were two halves of a whole, and we had both, in our own ways, fallen for the same broken alpha king. We figure it out, V said simply. Together, the three of us, whatever that looks like. The prophecy is fulfilled, I added. We united rather than destroyed, but that doesn't mean the work is done. The council's corruption spread far beyond this palace. Other packs, other territories, they'll need to know the truth, need to see that change is possible. Cole's expression hardened with determination. Then we show them, the Alpha King and the Silver Wolves united, a new beginning for all packs. We made our way back to the surface, the three of us moving as one. Behind us, the corrupted elders would face justice. The palace would be cleansed. A new council would be formed, one built on truth rather than fear. But as we emerged into the sunlight, I felt it. A disturbance on the horizon, like storm clouds gathering. The void had been sealed, the immediate conspiracy crushed, but its influence had spread far beyond our borders. Other territories had been infected, other packs compromised. The corruption we'd battled here was just one symptom of a disease that had been spreading through the werewolf world for years. You feel it too, V said, her hand finding mine. The work's just beginning, I agreed. Cole stood between us, his hands clasping ours, the three of us silhouetted against the rising sun. Then we face it together, whatever comes, however long it takes. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the story was far from over. We were the Silver Wolves, returned at last. We were the Alpha King, reborn through love and sacrifice. We were three souls bound by destiny and choice. And we were ready. The shadows gathering beyond the palace walls would learn what the void had learned too late. Balance, once achieved, is a force unstoppable. Together, we would either save the werewolf world or watch it burn. But we would face that future side by side, three hearts beating as one. The real battle was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the day we freed V and sealed the void. 3 months of trials, executions, and painful reformation. Thaddeus and his conspirators had faced the justice they'd evaded for years, public trials before representatives from every pack, their crimes laid bare for all to witness. Some had been executed, others imprisoned for life. All had been stripped of power and position. The palace felt different now, lighter, as if the very stones had exhaled a breath they'd been holding for 5 years. I stood in the moon garden where I'd nearly died, but the memory no longer held the same terror. Marta had helped me plant new flowers here, silver roses that bloomed only under moonlight, a living memorial to everything we'd survived and overcome. There you are. I turned to find Vi approaching, her silver hair catching the afternoon sun. She'd recovered remarkably in the months since her rescue, her body healing with the accelerated speed of our kind. But it was the light in her eyes that spoke of true recovery, the spark that imprisonment couldn't quite extinguish, now burning bright again. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, settling onto the stone bench beside me. "Too many thoughts." I leaned my head against her shoulder, marveling at how natural this closeness felt. We'd been strangers 3 months ago. Now I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. The delegates from the Northern Territories arrive tomorrow, if we can't convince them to join the alliance. "We will," Vi said with quiet confidence. "We've convinced 12 packs already. The North will see reason, especially once they understand the alternative." The alternative? The reports that kept coming from our borders told of other territories falling to the same corruption that had nearly destroyed us. The void might be sealed, but its influence had spread like disease through the werewolf world. Other shadow entities, other ancient evils, sensing weakness and division. "United we stand," I murmured, quoting the new council's motto. "Divided we fall," Vi completed. "And we're not dividing, not again, not ever." Footsteps on the garden path announced Cole's arrival. He looked better, too, the haunted expression that had defined him for 5 years replaced by something resembling peace, or at least purpose. "Ladies," he said with a slight smile, "the new council is assembled. They're waiting for us." The new council was everything the old one wasn't, younger, more diverse, chosen for integrity rather than lineage. We'd dismantled the hereditary system entirely, implementing term limits and accountability measures. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Together, the 3 of us walked toward the council chambers, not as Alpha and Luna, not as captor and captive, but as equals, partners. Whatever label fit this unusual bond we'd forged from tragedy and prophecy. The whispers had been inevitable, of course. An alpha king with 2 mates, both silver wolves, both bonded to him through destiny and choice. Some called it scandal, others called it salvation. We called it our truth and refused to apologize for it. The council meeting was productive. Plans for the northern delegation, strategies for border defense, proposals for a unified pack law that would prevent future conspiracies. When it ended, Cornelius approached with a document that made my breath catch. "I found this in the deepest archives," he said, his old eyes twinkling. "Thought you might want to see it." It was a genealogy, older than the one he'd shown me before. And at the top, written in faded ink, was a prophecy I'd never seen. "When shadow threatens to consume the light, the silver wolves shall return, not 1, but 2. Sisters of blood and moon, divided by fear, united by love. 3 souls bound as one shall restore the balance. The alpha who mourned, the sister who endured, the sister who awakened. Together they shall forge a new dawn." Not 1 silver wolf, 2. The prophecy had known all along, had planned for exactly what we'd become. 3 souls bound as one, Cole read over my shoulder. "I suppose that makes it official." "Makes what official?" Vi asked, joining us. "That we're exactly where we're meant to be." He pulled us both close, one arm around each of our shoulders. "No more guilt, no more wondering if this is wrong or right. The prophecy itself says this is how it should be." That night, we stood together on the palace ramparts, watching the full moon rise. Not 1 moon, but seemingly 3, the real moon reflected in our eyes, all glowing with the same silver fire. "There will be more fights," I said quietly. "More enemies. The shadow entities beyond our borders won't just surrender." "Then we'll face them," Vi replied, "like we've faced everything else." "Together," Cole added, the word that had become our promise and our power. Below us, the palace bustled with life. Servants who smiled instead of cowered. Guards loyal to truth rather than corruption. A council that served rather than exploited. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was better. And it would keep getting better. I thought about the girl I'd been 3 months ago, sold like property, terrified and powerless. That she felt like a stranger now. I'd found my sister, my power, my purpose. I'd found love in the most unexpected places and discovered that family wasn't always the one you were born into. Sometimes it was the one you chose. "I need to say something," Cole said suddenly. "Something I should have said a long time ago." He turned to face us both, his expression serious. "I'm sorry for buying you, for treating you like a replacement. For every moment I made you feel like you were second best to a memory." "Cole," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. And V, I'm sorry for failing you 5 years ago. For not seeing the conspiracy, for not protecting you, for leaving you in that darkness while I mourned someone who was still alive." V's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You couldn't have known." "I should have known, should have questioned, should have fought harder." He took a breath. "But I'm done apologizing for what we've become, for loving you both, for building something new from the ashes of what was lost. The past shaped us, but it doesn't define us anymore." "So what does define us?" I asked. Cole smiled, genuine and warm and free of shadows. "The future we're building, together, 3 souls bound as one, just like the prophecy said." As if in response, the moonstone fragments I still carried in a pouch around my neck began to glow. The pieces rose into the air, swirling around the 3 of us in a spiral of silver light. Then, impossibly, they began to reform, not into one pendant but 3 smaller ones, each perfect and whole. They settled around our necks simultaneously, warm against our skin, a symbol of what we'd broken and rebuilt, of how something shattered could become something stronger. "The prophecy is fulfilled," V said softly. "The silver wolves returned, the balance restored, the packs beginning to unite." "So what happens now?" I wondered aloud. "Now," Cole grinned, and it transformed his whole face into something young and hopeful. "Now we live, we love, we protect what we've built and prepare for whatever comes next. But we do it together without fear or guilt or apology." "I can live with that," I said. "So can I," V agreed. We stood together as the moon climbed higher, 3 figures silhouetted against the night sky. The Alpha King who'd learned to love again. The Silver Wolf who'd endured 5 years of darkness. The Silver Wolf who'd awakened to her destiny. Behind us, the palace glowed with warm light, a beacon of hope in a world still healing from corruption and shadow. Ahead of us, the future waited with all its challenges and promises. But we would face it together. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but our story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. And for the first time since this all started, since my father sold me, since Cole bought me, since I discovered I was more than I'd ever imagined, I felt something I'd almost forgotten was possible. I felt hope. Not just for myself, but for all of us, for every pack and territory, for a world that could be united rather than divided, balanced rather than corrupted. The Silver Wolves had returned, and we were ready for whatever came next. Together. Always together. The prophecy spoke of unity or destruction. We chose unity. We chose love. We chose to build something better from the ruins of what had been lost. And in choosing, we became exactly what the world needed. Proof that even the deepest wounds can heal, that even the darkest shadows can be overcome, and that sometimes the family you're meant to find is worth every trial it takes to reach them. Cole, V, and J's story continues in the hearts of all who believe that love, in all its forms, is the strongest magic of all. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button, and I will see you in my next story.